Good afternoon, you guys, and what's up, and welcome back to the Prime Vanguard channel. For today's deck profile, I'm going to be featuring to you my Regalia Angelica deck profile for the April 2021 meta. Now, I do want to note that in this video that I'm making right now, it is a week away from Overdress, but a lot of things happened for me personally, and I just didn't have time to get to record all my videos. I got a new camera, and I had to wait for that to come through the mail because my old one broke, and that's why I haven't been able to record all of these. But although all the thumbnails on this deck profile state that they are all for April, I really do feel comfortable with the deck builds that I have now for all the future videos coming out until the Overdress decks come out and I start featuring those on this channel. But I do want to say that all these deck profiles have been tested. They're everything that I played with. I'm not really playing Vanguard too much right now just because of personal reasons, but from when I was playing and I was play testing these decks against each other just to see what was the best combination of cards to do so, they're all comfortable with what I feel like they are going to be at. And because standard isn't getting any more support, well, at least VPremium isn't getting more support, I just don't feel as though I'm making changes to these deck profiles even after it. So that's why the thumbnails still say April on them, even though we are in May. But that's just the quick summary of what's been going on with me and what's been happening and why the thumbnails state that. But back to the video. My Angelica deck is one that I actually have a lot of fun with. I think that's a huge boost to Divine Gauge. It is the final support that we get for it, as it is part of the Clan Selection Volume 2. And it's strong. I just don't think that it's better than Uranus. I don't think that's better than the Fenrir attacking loop that we have right now in VPremium. I think that out of all the Genesis builds, this is probably like the third strongest between those two. But it is something that has popped up from Clan Selection Volume 2. The deck is really self-explanatory and it's very simple to play because you have two forms of win con, which is the beatdown with the Angelica or the multiple attacking Vanguard with the Yggdrasil sisters, and that's just how this deck follows. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and show you my deck profile for Angelica. So let's get started. Before I start the deck profile, I do want to state that I am very happy with the first game mat that I've ever gotten from Zero Damage Gaming. I ordered it during the time that I was able to record videos because I got tired of looking at all those old mats that I have. I bought two more from them and I'm going to be very excited to showcase them to you on the channel later. But with Overdress coming out and me being a Stoichia player, I'm very happy to have this Alchemagic play mat. And I'm very excited that it's going to be towards the new era of Vanguard. But let's get started. For my first grade 3 of the deck, I play 4 copies of Regalia of Wisdom Angelica. Angelica is an amazing card as she introduces healing to Genesis, which it's never had before. She introduces the Divine Gauge effect of being able to prevent your opponents from being targeted with triggers and gaining 5,000 power to all of your units. She herself has this ability to make sure that it is continuous, and the fact that it does happen on your opponent's turn means that your opponent isn't going to be able to damage an eye with the rear guards, but that doesn't really matter as much as we are using her third effect to go ahead and get the healing off thanks to all the Divine Gauges that we have from this. For my next grade 3, I play 4 copies of Cosmic Regalia CEO Yggdrasil. Honestly, CEO Yggdrasil is the true win con of Divine Gauge. She offers multiple Vanguard attacks. She also offers the best protection from all the Divine Gauge units compared to Artemis and Angelica. She can use her effect on the Vanguard or Rearguard circle, meaning you could potentially have multiple Rearguard attacks. And the fact that she offers Divine Gauge as well and boosting to the units means that all the cards that we now have in our hand, grade 3s and grade 2s, become offensively much better. And this is the grade 3 that I really do focus the deck around. I think Angelica is cool, but I think that Yggdrasil and just sitting on her is better. And if you re-ride her over the game or you ride her over Angelica after you get done setting up all your Divine Gauges for the pieces that you need to beat your opponent on the next turn, is extremely amazing to do. It's a very easy setup that this deck can get, as like I stated before with the new support for the deck, getting multiple Divine Gauges isn't hard at all. So setting up to go into your Yggdrasil plays is something that you ideally want to go for, and that's how I focus my deck around this strategy. I play 4 copies of Demon Exorcist Regalia Thrud. Thrud is the best supporting grade 2 Regalia unit that we have for Divine Gauge. Her ability is extremely free, and the fact that she gets multiple Divine Gauges that you can put onto herself to get additional card draw and moving into the soul is one of the ways that we are recycling our units to get Divine Gauges, because this way we don't have to soul charge from our deck so much to get that That means that we're not going to be decking out fast or having long games, as we can rely on our rear guard to do the same thing for us to get our soul back to make sure we get the divine gauges. I play 4 copies of Regalia of Fate's Norn. Regalia of Fate Norn is just completely necessary for the combo of having Yggdrasil. You need to be playing 4 copies of this, as her Vanguard or Rearguard ability is extremely helpful to get the additional multiple gauges that you need, as well as additional card draw. Her ability to help set up for your Yggdrasil grade 3 attacks on the Vanguard circle is important, as well as our strategy does focus on CEO Yggdrasil to make multiple attacks in the Vanguard circle. So you need to be able to make sure that you can max out 4 copies of this card so that you can get it for Yggdrasil's ability. Finally, for my last grade 2, I played 3 copies of Twilight Hunter Artemis. Twilight Hunter Artemis is just a big beat stick for Divine Gauge. She puts on a lot of pressure, as your opponent doesn't want to let you keep stacking Divine Gauges on her, because if you do, she just gets bigger and bigger over time, and because she can't be targeted or affected by card effects later in the game, your opponent's going to have this unit that's going to be swinging like 80k towards them all the time, and if you stack trigger effects on this card will just demand a perfect guard later. I do want to say that out of all the cards in the deck, Twilight Hunter Artemis is the most flexible one. I personally chose to play her just because she fits the theme of Divine Gauge in the deck, and making her a big beat stick in games nowadays is actually really helpful to take more cards by our opponent's hand. When we go into our Yggdrasil attack, it becomes a lot scarier. But if you wanted to play Gleipnir, that's good too. I have no problem with Gleipnir. Gleipnir's a really amazing card because he recycles himself and gets you cards from the soul. If you wanted to play the grade 2 that lets you get an additional force marker when you ride into it, really good card too. I would just have to add 1 more copy of it to make sure that I can see it in most of my games, so that I can guarantee that I get the additional force marker so that my grade 3 turns are a lot stronger. But I just want to throw that little tidbit in there because Twilight Hunter Artemis isn't necessarily a necessary slot for the deck. It's not like she contributes anything else other than becoming another big beat stick, but we already are a force deck, meaning that we already have good numbers, especially when we add the triggers to them. So if you don't want to play Artemis, you can go ahead and play 2 of the other card options that I suggested to you. I'm going to go ahead and showcase my grade 1s now. So for my tech choice of the deck, I play 2 copies of Supportive Sorcerer Communis. Now, as I had stated earlier in the deck profile, my winning image for this deck is to set up a board with your CEO Yggdrasil, so that when you go ahead and use her multiple Vanguard attacks to go against your opponent, it's going to be your ideally winning image for the deck. And Communis is good for that strategy because the additional 5,000 power on our Vanguard, along with the Force 1 or Force 2 that we potentially might be giving to them, is just extremely helpful. And getting as much power as we can to her is helpful, as well as once we do attack with her and we stack the trigger effects onto her, we're not going to have 2 extra drive checks but 1 more to go into, meaning that this way her attack will be very demanding of our opponents, either use a perfect guard or use multiple cards from their hand to block it, and if not, we got a card like Twilight Hunter Artemis who can get the job done. But this is simply just to enforce the idea that we are using Yggdrasil to win our games. You don't have to play this. A lot of people play Hati if you want to, but Hati just didn't do what I wanted to do. I prefer Communis, but that's completely up to you. For my next grade 1, I play 4 copies of Mythic Beast Skoll. Mythic Beast Skoll is our grade 3 search in the deck. It is very important that we see our grade 3s, and we are manipulating cards in our soul all the time because we are Genesis, so the 5,000 power is easy to get. For my next grade 1, I play 4 copies of White Brush Witch Artic. White Brush Witch Artic is another new card introduced to us from Clan Selection Volume 2, and although she's not a Regalia, she does have a really simple and supportive effect that again adds 5,000 power to our Vanguard, which does enforce the idea of the strategy that I have behind you. The only difference between her and Communis is that she's an auto ability, meaning that I have multiple times to recur this effect whenever I would use her skill. And her Vanguard or Rearguard ability to manipulate the top cards of our deck does come clutch later in the game, as we can make our opponent second guess how they're going to guard our attack if we need to get a trigger on top or if we just need extra soul. But either way, having deck manipulation and then an ability that gives 5,000 more power to our Vanguard is really awesome to have for this deck, as it does again enforce the strategy on using Yggdrasil to multiple attack our opponent's Vanguard. And finally, for my last grade 1, I play 4 copies of Oblation Regalia Var. Var is the best supporting grade 1 you have in the deck. Let's just keep it really simple here. Her ability to get you a Divine Gauge throughout any period in the game, at the beginning of the game or later in the game, or just whenever you use her, is amazing to have, as we're always guaranteed at least one Divine Gauge on our board if we're in a really sticky situation. Her second ability to force Divine Gauges for away to get a Soul Charger 3 is extremely helpful to have, as Divine Gauges do take cards out from your soul, and she's one of the cards that helps us get a big boost in the soul and the counter charge as well in case we are in a pickle, and having that ability to always be accessible to us is extremely helpful. So you do want to max out 4 copies of this card, because there are times in the game where your opponent will try to manipulate your resources, and then all you have is just your Divine Gauges that are already on the units you have, and this card simply makes it to where we can just get more on the board if we run a counterblast, or if we're just having a hard time getting soul to do our resources because we're either too late in the game or we just haven't had so much time to set up for earlier in the game to go into our Yggdrasil turn. Moving on to the triggers of the deck, I play 4 copies of Witchapot's Laurier. I play 4 copies of Goddess of Self-Sacrifice Kushinada. I play 4 copies of Mercury of Gravitias. I play 4 copies of Battle Maiden Kukirihime. And for my starter of the deck, I'm playing 1 copy of Aiming for the Stars, Artemis. All right, everybody, so we are at the point in the video where we can go ahead and discuss the marker that is best for the deck. Now, CEO Yggdrasil is my main win condition for the deck and how I want to play the deck, and that means that I believe going Force 2 is the best way to do so. Because we are focusing our strategy on a multiple attacking Vanguard, having the ability to have the additional critical on there means that we can get additional criticals through our attacks. We're going to have a restanding Vanguard who can attack multiple times, and because our deck plays a high amount of critical triggers, we have an additional chance of seeing additional criticals, which will affect our power and critical rate, meaning her attack will just become more lethal over time. If we find ourselves sitting on Angelica just throughout the game, Force 2 is also the best option to go, because we're still going to rely on the Yggdrasil to get our multiple attacks, but we'll use the additional power from Angelica and Yggdrasil's effect with the Force 2 on the rearguard circle, meaning that we'll be able to generate multiple rearguard attacks by the additional critical effect and apply the power to her. Angelica's additional 5,000 power, along with the fact that we're going to have units behind her that gives additional 5,000 power to our Vanguard, means that we're going to have 1 strong rearguard attack and 1 strong Vanguard attack against our opponent. So therefore, Force 2 is just the best option to go to for this deck. Alright, you guys, so that is it for today's deck profile. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed today's video, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up. It helps the channel. Do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell so you guys are notified when I have a lot more deck profiles coming out. I have the rest of my Clan Selection Volume 2 deck profiles coming out, and then once Overdress goes ahead and drops, I'll be doing all my Overdress videos from there. It'll be a break from VPremium, but that's why I'm trying to get all these done as soon as I possibly can. So stay tuned.